Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Confessions. Let's not waste time. Let's just say this. 15 years after she shattered my world, she found me again. And her letter began with the words, "I never stopped dreaming of us." I was holding a box of engine parts on my porch when I saw the envelope jammed in the crack of my screen door. No postage. Just my name in handwriting I hadn't seen in a decade and a half. Elegant, slanted, like every letter was trying to look perfect even when it wasn't. My hands shook before I even touched it. I didn't open it right away. I stood there, just staring at it while the sun scorched the back of my neck and sweat dripped down my spine. I knew who it was from. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. Not after all this time. Not after everything she put me through. Geneva, the woman who once kissed my eyelids while I slept. The woman who, 15 years ago, humiliated me on a scale I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And now she had the audacity to show up in my life again, quietly, like a shadow. I brought the letter inside and placed it on my kitchen table like it was ticking. Then I made a sandwich I couldn't taste. Fed my cat Marvin. Stared at the letter again. My stomach was in knots, my palms were damp, and for some stupid reason, my heart was hopeful, and I hated that. When I finally opened it, I expected regret, or guilt, or some pathetic attempt at apology. But no. The first line read, "I know I never said goodbye. I was a coward, but I never stopped dreaming of us. I never stopped wondering if you still wear your glasses when you read late at night." She remembered things I didn't even remember about myself. She said she wanted to meet. 1 hour. One conversation. She claimed it wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation, just truth. She wanted to tell me what really happened the night she left. The night she vanished from our marriage, from my life, from everything we built. She never explained back then. Just packed a bag and left behind a voicemail saying, "It's better if I go. You'll understand someday." I never understood. I just spiraled. When the scandal broke 2 weeks later, it felt like someone had aired my personal tragedy on national television. Geneva, my Geneva, was exposed as the mistress of a married city official in another state. A man with children. A man whose wife called me on my work phone to scream at me for being an enabler. I didn't even know the guy existed. I didn't even know my wife existed anymore. I lost my job, my apartment, my sense of reality. And now she wanted to talk. She said she was dying. No, really. That was the final paragraph. Something vague about her health failing and needing peace before it was too late. She left a phone number. I stared at it for 3 straight hours, dialing and hanging up, dialing and hanging up. And then I burned the letter. I stood in my backyard with a cigarette lighter I hadn't used in years and watched it curl and blacken, until all that remained was ash and anger. I told myself that was the end of it. But that night, I dreamed about her. And when I woke up, there was a voicemail. It was her voice. Older. Shaky. Still her. "Wendell, please. If you hate me, I understand. But if you knew the whole story, you might not." She was wrong. I didn't hate her. I wished I hated her. What I felt was worse. And God help me. I think I might call her back. I wasn't going to call her. I swore I wouldn't. I burned the letter, after all. I thought that was symbolic enough. The emotional equivalent of slamming a door shut and throwing away the key. But burning a piece of paper isn't the same as erasing 15 years of unanswered questions. And when you've been left without closure for that long, even a ghost can start to sound like hope. I waited until midnight. Not because it was strategic. I just couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my couch, the TV flickering without sound, Marvin curled beside me, and my phone in my hand like it weighed 100 pounds. The number was still there in my call log, taunting me. Geneva's voicemail played in my head on a loop. That voice, softer now, cracked in the corners, but still undeniably hers, had somehow pulled me back into a story I never agreed to finish. So I called. It rang 3 times. I was ready to hang up when I heard her answer. "Wendell?" she said, like she wasn't sure if it was real. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Her voice hit me like a truck. It wasn't just the sound of it. It was everything wrapped inside it. Every morning kiss. Every lie. Every silent dinner. Every night I waited up for a woman who was already gone. "It's me." I finally choked out, and I hated how weak I sounded. She exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath for 15 years. "I didn't think you'd call. You left me without a word, Geneva. You don't get to be surprised I'm here. You're the one who disappeared." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "You're right." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her where she went, why she did it, who that man was, and how she could destroy my life so easily and still have the audacity to say my name like it mattered. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the blank wall across from me like it could absorb everything I didn't know how to say. I was scared, she said, as if that were some kind of explanation. I know that sounds pathetic, but it's the truth. Scared of what? I asked, my voice sharp now. Of being honest? Of loving me? Of not being the villain? Her reply was slow and deliberate. Scared of what you'd do if you knew the truth. That stopped me cold. What truth? She didn't answer right away. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. Then she said, "It wasn't just the affair, Wendell. There were other things. Things I never told you because I thought I was protecting you." I almost laughed. Protecting me? Geneva, you lit my life on fire and watched it burn from another state. Don't pretend this was some noble act. I'm dying, she said suddenly. The doctors think I have less than a year. I sat back, stunned. What? I didn't reach out for pity, she continued. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I want you to hear everything. The real story. From the beginning. Before I go. And just like that, the ground shifted beneath me again. I didn't know if she was lying. I didn't know if this was another manipulation, one last twist in a long history of betrayal. But part of me needed to hear her out, if only to confirm that the woman I once loved was truly beyond redemption. Because if there was more to the story, if there were layers I never saw, maybe I'd stop waking up at 3 a.m. wondering what I did wrong. She asked if we could meet. 1 hour. Public place. No expectations. Against every instinct screaming inside me, I said yes. Not because I trust her, but because some ghosts don't stay buried. And this one wasn't done with me yet. I agreed to meet her. I don't know why. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was self-destruction disguised as curiosity. Or maybe I just wanted to see if 15 years could change a woman who once vanished like smoke and left me sifting through the ashes. Either way, I said yes. 1 hour. Neutral ground. A diner on the edge of town that still smelled like melted butter and regret. Perfect. I arrived early, because of course I did. I even combed my hair and changed my shirt twice. For what? I have no idea. It wasn't a date. It wasn't even a reunion. It was a funeral for an old life I never properly buried. She walked in exactly on time. The doorbell jingled, and there she was. Geneva. No dramatic music. No spotlight. Just a woman standing in front of me who had once been my entire world and then left without turning around. She looked older. Not in a cruel way, just real. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray near the temples. She wore a pale green sweater, the kind she used to steal from me and never return. And her eyes, those same hazel eyes I used to lose myself in, had a weight I didn't recognize. A tiredness that went deeper than time. "Hi," she said, sliding into the booth across from me like we did this every Tuesday. "Hi," I replied, unable to find anything sharper. She ordered coffee. Black, 2 sugars. Just like before. We sat in silence for a while, the clinking of dishes around us filling the space where our words should have been. And then she broke the spell. "Do you remember Milo Eddings?" I blinked. Of all the things I expected her to say, that name was not one of them. Milo Eddings. I hadn't heard that name in nearly 20 years. He was my college roommate for a semester, a lanky political science major who wore mismatched socks and had an obsession with conspiracy theories. We lost touch after graduation, and I hadn't thought of him since. But back then, I remember Geneva teasing me about how Milo always seemed to know things before anyone else, about professors, about campus gossip, about me. "He's the man I had the affair with," she said, staring straight into her cup like the truth was floating somewhere in the steam. My stomach turned. "Milo," I whispered. "You with him?" She nodded. "It started a year before I left. I didn't plan it. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even passionate. It was messy, lonely, confusing. He reached out one night, said he was in town for a conference. We got drinks. I thought it would be harmless. I was wrong. I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry and my thoughts were sprinting in every direction. Milo was married," she continued. "Had a wife and 2 kids. But he said they were separating. He said she didn't understand him. I know how that sounds. I know how cliché it is. But I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to believe someone could still see me as something other than a wife who was slipping away." The words stung more than I expected. Slipping away from what? From me? Geneva's eyes glistened. She didn't answer that. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph, a printed, creased, worn at the edges photo of a baby girl. "This is Lena," she said, voice trembling. "She's 14. She doesn't know who her father is. She thinks Milo is dead. And I need you to know something." I stared at the photo, and for a terrifying second, my brain did the math. My hands felt like stone. "She's not yours," she said quickly, reading my face. "But I need you to understand, I was pregnant when I left you. I didn't even know it until a week after I disappeared, and by then, everything was already falling apart." I couldn't breathe. "You left me," I said, my voice like gravel. "You left me with no explanation, no goodbye, no truth. And you were pregnant?" I thought it was Milo's. He wanted nothing to do with her. He vanished too. His wife found out. The media got involved. And then I was alone. Completely. I stood up. I couldn't sit there anymore. The walls of that diner were closing in, and I could feel my heart pounding in places it hadn't in years. 15 years of silence. 15 years of believing she left because I wasn't enough. 15 years of humiliation, grief, and wondering what I did wrong. And now I knew. She hadn't just abandoned me. She'd abandoned herself. And now she wanted to rewrite the ending. "I can't do this," I said, backing toward the door. "Please," she said, standing too. "There's more. So much more. Just one more meeting. I'll tell you everything. I swear. And then I'll disappear forever." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I used to love. I saw a stranger clinging to a past we couldn't fix. Still, I nodded. One more meeting. Because the truth hadn't finished ruining me yet. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the same chair for hours, staring at nothing, as the storm she dropped on me soaked through everything I thought I knew. Milo Eddings. The affair. The pregnancy. The daughter. The photo. Her voice echoing in my head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. I kept asking myself why I agreed to see her again, why I hadn't just walked away and let that old life rot in peace. But when someone reopens a wound you've buried for 15 years, walking away doesn't feel like healing. It feels like cowardice. And I've spent too long being afraid. So I met her again. Same booth. Same diner. A little earlier this time, like my subconscious wanted more space between us and the dinner rush. She was already there when I arrived, sipping a tea she'd barely touched. Her hands were trembling, and there was a piece of paper on the table folded into thirds. When she saw me, she didn't smile. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't think you'd come back." I didn't answer. Saturday, this isn't about excuses," she said. "This is about the part you never knew. The part one never had the courage to tell you." I leaned back in the booth, my arms crossed, waiting. I was tired of drama. Tired of twists. Tired of being surprised. I thought there was nothing she could say that would hit harder than what I'd already heard. I was wrong. She unfolded the paper. It was a medical form. From 15 years ago. Dated 3 months before she left me. I scanned it quickly. It wasn't pregnancy-related. It wasn't therapy records or divorce filings. It was a DNA report. My throat closed. "I had a miscarriage 3 months before I got pregnant with Lena," she said, her voice barely holding. "It was difficult. Emotionally. Physically. But the baby I lost. Wendell, it was yours. And I never told you I was pregnant. I didn't know how. I was scared. You were working long hours. We were already drifting. And She looked up at me, and I saw real grief there. Not just sadness, but a kind of hollowed-out pain you can't fake. I lost her at 9 weeks. Alone. In a hospital bathroom. I never told the staff who to call. I just walked out. And after that, I unraveled. Milo wasn't the cause. He was the distraction. I couldn't process what I was hearing. A child I never knew about. A part of me that existed and was gone before I could even imagine it. And she'd buried it with silence. "I thought," she said slowly, "that if I told you, it would break you. You were already so fragile, so soft. You carried everything like it was your fault. And I knew if you found out, you'd blame yourself. You always do." I opened my mouth, but I had no words. Because she was right. I would have blamed myself. I still did. Then she handed me another envelope. "This is the one I didn't leave for you back then," she said. "I wrote it after I lost the baby. I never sent it. But you deserve to read it." I took it, holding it like a fragile thing. And I knew, whatever was inside, it was going to undo me. I didn't come back for forgiveness. she said again, softer now. I came back because the story you've been living with isn't the full one. I shattered your world. But before I go, I needed you to see all the pieces. I don't remember much else from that meeting. I walked out into the parking lot like I was moving underwater. I didn't say goodbye, didn't even look back. The envelope sat on my passenger seat, heavy as a brick. I didn't open it for hours. When I did, I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I cried harder than I have in years. Because inside that letter, Geneva wrote something that shattered the foundation of everything I believed about our past. You were never not enough. I just convinced myself I wasn't allowed to be loved so gently. And just like that, 15 years of anger turned into 15 years of confusion. I wasn't sure if I wanted closure anymore. I wanted answers. And Geneva wasn't done talking. For the next few days, I told myself I wouldn't call her. I swore I wouldn't see her again. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that letter. Every sentence rattled around in my head like loose change in a dryer. You were never not enough. I convinced myself I wasn't allowed to be loved so gently. That kind of honesty doesn't just land, it detonates. I didn't know what I was trying to figure out anymore. Was I looking for closure? For clarity? Or for some twisted sense of peace from a woman who once left me like an afterthought? Maybe I just wanted the story to finally make sense, not the version I made up in my loneliness, but the real one. The one with blood and cracks and shame. So I went looking, not for Geneva, but for Milo. I didn't even know where to start. The man had ghosted from the public eye after his affair with Geneva made headlines. He'd been forced to resign from the city planning board. His wife had divorced him in a very public mess, and according to one old blog I found buried under broken links, he'd relocated to Idaho. That was over a decade ago. But then I remembered something. A box in my attic labeled college stuff. I hadn't opened it in years, but I dug it out and started sifting through it like it was buried treasure. Old notebooks, a busted-up lava lamp, a faded hoodie with Pine Valley campus rec stitched across the chest. And then I found it. A photo. A Polaroid I'd completely forgotten existed. It was from junior year. A backyard barbecue. Geneva on my lap, smiling at the camera. Me, looking like I'd just discovered heaven in her hair. And Milo was in the background, talking to someone. Not just anyone. To my brother. My younger brother, Clayton. It was like someone shoved a fist through my chest. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours. My brother and Milo had known each other. They talked. I racked my memory, flipping through dusty memories like pages in a burning book. Had they ever met? Had they hung out behind my back? And then it hit me. The wedding. Geneva and I got married in the fall. Small church, nothing fancy. My brother was supposed to be best man, but he canceled last minute. Emergency work thing. He sent a card and a half-hearted apology. Geneva never asked about him again. My heart sank. I picked up the phone and called Geneva. No greeting. Just one question. How well did Milo know my brother? Silence. Then, meet me tomorrow. Please. There's more. I didn't know how to tell you, but I will now. That night, I didn't sleep. Again, my thoughts twisted themselves into knots I couldn't untangle. Had Milo and Clayton known about each other? Had my own brother been part of this betrayal? Was it possible this web had been spun long before Geneva ever left? That I was living inside a lie, surrounded by smiling faces who'd all known something I didn't? The next day, I met Geneva in a different place. Not the diner. This time, it was a quiet park near the river, the kind of place people go when they're about to confess something heavy. She was already sitting on the bench when I arrived, holding a folder on her lap like it contained a confession or a weapon. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, she said. You deserve the truth, and I've avoided it long enough. She opened the folder and handed me a printed email thread. It was dated 3 months before she left me. From Milo Eddings. To Geneva Harkins. Subject, Clayton. The contents of the email made my vision blur. They had been talking about my brother. About a trip they all took when I wasn't there. About how Clayton introduced Geneva to Milo at a conference before I even knew they were both attending. About a deal. About favors. And at the very bottom, the sentence that destroyed me. If Wendell finds out how this started, he'll never forgive either of us. Keep your story clean. Stick to the timeline. I felt like I'd been dropped into someone else's life. My own brother had introduced my wife to the man she would eventually leave me for. And based on the wording of the email, it wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated. Why? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. Why would he do that? Why would you? Geneva's hands trembled. Because Clayton owed Milo a debt. Financial. Legal. I don't know all the details. But Milo used it to manipulate everything. Me. Your brother. Us. My mind was spinning. But you still chose him, I said. Whatever his leverage was, you still climbed into his bed. You still packed your bags and walked out on everything we had. Geneva looked down. Yes, I did. I was weak. I was scared. But I never stopped thinking about you. And every day after that, I hated myself a little more. I stood there, feeling like I was looking at my past through shattered glass. My brother. My wife. A manipulator behind the curtain. And me, the clueless fool everyone thought was too soft to ever fight back. But they were wrong. Because now I knew the whole story. And I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. I hadn't spoken to Clayton in almost 12 years. After Geneva left me, he kept his distance, sent a couple of awkward texts, offered to help me move once, then disappeared into his high-rise banking job and never looked back. I thought we just drifted apart, like brothers sometimes do. I blamed distance. Work. Life. Now I knew the truth. He wasn't avoiding me. He was hiding from what he'd done. I made the drive out to Illinois in silence. No radio. No distractions. Just the hum of the tires and the weight of a folder sitting in my passenger seat like a loaded weapon. The sky was overcast, heavy and still, like even the weather was bracing for what I was about to do. Clayton lived in a sharp-looking glass condo overlooking a golf course, the kind of place that screamed I win. I waited in my truck for 20 minutes before I even rang his buzzer. And when he opened the door, barefoot, holding a tumbler of something amber, the shock on his face was almost satisfying. Wendell, got a minute? He hesitated, but stepped aside. Of course. His place was spotless. Minimalist. Cold. Expensive. There was no sign of kids. No sign of anyone else living there. Just him, alone, sipping whiskey at 2 in the afternoon. You look good, he said, pouring me a drink I didn't ask for. I didn't touch it. I pulled the folder out of my coat and dropped it on his counter. He didn't reach for it. He just stared. And for a moment, he didn't even blink. Where did you get this? He asked finally. You knew Milo, I said. Before Geneva did. You introduced them. He swallowed hard, then took another slow sip from his glass. It wasn't supposed to go that far, he said eventually, quietly. It was a favor. A favor? I snapped. You handed my wife over like a bargaining chip. He was going to tank a deal I was involved in, Clayton said. Backroom stuff. Land contracts. It would have cost me everything. He wanted a connection in local media, someone who could spin stories for him. Geneva was working freelance for a publication at the time. I introduced them. That's it. That's it. I repeated, stunned. She ended up in bed with him. Pregnant by him. Destroyed by him. And you think this was just a casual networking favor? I didn't know it would go there, he said, voice rising. And when I found out, it was too late. She'd already left you. Milo was blackmailing everyone by then. He was dangerous, Wendell. You think you got burned? Everyone did. I stepped forward. You could have warned me. You were fragile, he said. You always were. And I didn't know how to tell you that I played a part in your collapse. I didn't want to be the villain in your story. You are the villain, I said. You were my brother. And you sold me out for a real estate contract. Clayton didn't say anything. He just stood there, glass shaking slightly in his hand. For once, he didn't look polished. He looked like a man who'd built an empire out of guilt and was terrified someone had finally found the cornerstone. I didn't ask you to forgive me, he said. But you came all this way. So ask what you came to ask. I looked at him. This man who shared my blood, my childhood, my holidays and schoolyard bruises, and I asked the one question that had kept me awake every night since Geneva handed me that folder. Did you know she was pregnant with my child before she left? His eyes widened just enough to betray everything. He started. That's all I needed, I said, backing toward the door. Wendell. No, I said firmly. You don't get to say anything else. You don't get to rewrite your part in this. I don't care what Milo had on you. I don't care how scared you were. I needed a brother, and you chose yourself. I left without another word. When I got back in my truck, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring through the windshield, feeling a hollow inside me that was older than this betrayal. Maybe it had always been there, waiting for this moment to give it a name. Back home, I found another envelope in my mailbox. From Geneva. This time, it wasn't a letter. It was a photograph. A recent one. A young girl standing outside a high school theater, holding a bouquet, mid-laugh. Long brown hair. Same crooked smile I used to see every morning. On the back, one sentence. She wants to meet you. And now, I had a choice to make. The photograph sat on my table for 3 days before I could even touch it again. That girl, Lena, with her flowers and laughter frozen in a perfect blur of motion, was a living reminder of everything I lost and everything I might still gain. I'd stared at her smile for hours. Geneva said she wasn't mine, and I believed her. But something about that picture clung to me like static. It wasn't just her face. It was the way she stood. The way her chin tilted slightly to the left. That was me. I used to do that when I was nervous. When I was trying to pretend I was fine. She wanted to meet me. That's what Geneva had written, as if it were so simple. As if all the broken years between then and now could be bridged with a handshake and a cup of coffee. But this wasn't a reunion. This wasn't a movie moment. This was real. And real had weight. I didn't know what she'd been told. Did Lena know about me? About what Geneva did? About how she'd left her own marriage in shambles and then disappeared into another disaster? Or had she grown up thinking her father died, or left, or never cared enough to stay? That thought gutted me. I called Geneva. It rang once. She answered like she'd been sitting beside the phone. She looks like you, doesn't she? She asked quietly. She does, I admitted. You said she wasn't mine. She's not. I had the test done, but I can't undo how much of you lives in her. Silence. She doesn't know about me, does she? I asked. No, Geneva said. Not the full story. She knows someone loved me once. She knows I ruined it. She's been asking questions since I got sick. Real ones. About family. About mistakes. About what I ran from. You told her. My heart nearly stopped. I told her enough to know she wanted to meet you, she said. The rest, she should hear from you. I didn't answer. My throat had tightened too much. I'm not asking you to play dad, Wendell, Geneva continued. I'm asking you to meet a girl who deserves to know where the better parts of her soul came from. That line shattered me. I agreed. We met at a library. Neutral ground. Quiet. She was sitting by the window when I arrived, a worn paperback in her hand, sneakers tapping nervously against the tile. She looked up, and our eyes met. She gave a small wave, then smiled. And I swear to you, in that moment, I saw something I didn't know I'd been longing for, a kind of silent recognition. You're Wendell, she said, standing awkwardly. Geneva said I could call you that. You can call me anything, I said. Wendell's just fine. She smiled again. She said you were kind. I sat down, unsure of what to say. What do you say to a child who was born out of betrayal and still managed to become light? We talked about safe things at first. Books, school, her dream to be a stage actress. I asked about her favorite roles. She asked if I'd ever done anything brave. And then she said, why did my mom leave you? The question hit me like a punch. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. It was the kind of question only someone untouched by bitterness could ask. She was hurting, I said, and I think she thought leaving would protect us both. Did it? I paused. No. She nodded. It didn't protect me either. And then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote you something, she said. Geneva didn't ask me to. I had dreams about you. Before I ever saw your face. I thought maybe this would explain it better. I took the paper, hands trembling. I didn't open it yet. I couldn't. I just held it, afraid of what one more truth might do to my heart. We sat there another hour. When it was time to leave, she hugged me. Not shy, not awkward. Just a quiet, strong hug like she'd done it 100 times before. And when I drove home that night, I parked outside my house and opened her letter in the silence. It was a poem. About rivers. About people who drift apart and still find ways to meet again downstream. About time not being linear and pain not being permanent. And at the bottom, she wrote, maybe I wasn't yours, but I've always been part of your story. I sat in the truck for a long time after that, staring at the dashboard, at the stars, at the old ring I still kept in my glove box like a relic from a war I lost. Geneva had destroyed my past. But this girl, this beautiful, innocent, accidental miracle, had just given me something I never thought I'd get back. A future. I didn't rush to see Geneva after meeting Lena. I needed time to let the experience settle in my chest like warm rain after a long, cruel drought. That girl, our girl, in a way, had opened a door inside me I thought was sealed for good. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't blame me. She just was. A calm in the storm I'd been weathering for half my life. But Geneva's illness wasn't waiting. 3 weeks after our last conversation, she called and left a voicemail. Her voice was thinner, softer. There was no bitterness, no apology, just a gentle invitation. If you want to say goodbye, now would be the time. I drove to her place the next morning. It wasn't the grand return I thought it might be. She didn't look surprised to see me. She just patted the empty chair beside her bed and smiled like I'd only been gone a moment, not 15 years. Her hair had thinned. Her frame had shrunk. But her eyes, they were still hers. Still capable of cutting through me in a second. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I wasn't sure I would either. She nodded. You met her. I did. And she's better than both of us. That made her laugh, weak but sincere. Yeah, she really is. We didn't talk about the affair. Or Milo. Or my brother. That chapter was already burned and buried. What we talked about instead was who we had been before all of it. The version of us that danced in the kitchen at midnight and argued about how to stack books. The us before fear and guilt and selfish decisions pulled us apart. And then she said something that stuck to my ribs like it belonged there. I know I'm not dying in anyone's arms, she whispered. But knowing I'm not dying in your hate, that's more than I ever thought I deserved. I didn't have the words. I just held her hand. She drifted in and out of sleep. I stayed until sunset. And before I left, she handed me one final envelope. This one was sealed. Open it after, she said. She passed 2 nights later. When I opened the envelope, it wasn't a confession. It wasn't some dramatic final truth. It was a photo from our honeymoon. Geneva and I standing barefoot on a beach, laughing about something I don't even remember. And on the back, in her handwriting, you were always my safest place. I just didn't know how to stay safe back then. I cried harder than I ever had. Not from pain, but from release. Geneva wasn't my future, but she wasn't my prison anymore either. In the weeks that followed, Lena and I stayed in touch. No forced roles. No expectations. Just honest, human connection. She sent me another poem. I helped her with a school project about storytelling. She asked if she could keep calling me Wendell. I told her she could call me anything she wanted. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt like I belonged in my own life again. Not as someone's leftover, but as someone worth meeting halfway. If you made it this far, thank you. This was one of the hardest stories I've ever had to tell. But it taught me something. Not all broken things stay broken. Sometimes, they just change shape. Have you ever reconnected with someone from your past, and it went nothing like you expected? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too. And don't forget, you're watching Reddit Confessions. If this story moved you, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with someone who needs to hear that healing is possible, even after all the wreckage. Until next time.